Hello, everybody. It is great to be here one more time today. My name is Gary Fowler. I'm the CEO, president, and founder of GSD Get You Done Venture Studios, premier AI and quantum venture studio located in the heart of Silicon Valley. And today we're at Silicon Valley AI and Tech, and my co-host Bill Reichert is here. Bill is coming on board right now. Hey, Bill, how you doing?
Hey, Gary. Great to be back. Thanks for having me.
The legendary Bill Reichert, Rogers Technology Ventures, Pegasus, Stanford, Harvard. I mean, you got all the credentials.
Well, yeah, exactly right. So, no, it's been a wild ride. Never would have thought that we would be here at this point, I guess. But it's certainly interesting what's going on these days.
So what's happening, Bill, right now? What's the sense? I'm actually in Palo Alto right now myself. But
Uh-huh.
what's the sense of, the with the new administration in? I mean, what are the feelings in the valley right now?
I tell you, I mean, it's a tale of two cities at some level. I mean, so the other day was the Y Combinator demo day, right? And it just emphasized the intensity of what's going on in the startup community around trying to grab every corner that every entrepreneur can grab of this agentic AI opportunity that has emerged. And so it reminds me a lot of prior cycles, like Web 2.0, mobile first, when you had this explosion of startups around this sort of novel infrastructure, that was, the social media infrastructure and then the mobile infrastructure and now the large language model and generative AI infrastructure. And so it is just a Cambrian explosion that's going on in the startup community, and then this overlay of what's going on in the macro economy in terms of, boy, I mean, the sort of global turmoil that has been created by all of this uncertainty around, what is the White House going to do today, and then what are they going to do tomorrow? You just don't know. And so it's interesting that depending on the conversation, that is totally ignored because there's so much energy and potential in the technology side. But then when you're talking about raising capital, long-term funding, the exit scenarios, then all of a sudden, oops, this macro environment becomes a pretty important factor in your thinking and in your decision making. So, it's pretty asymmetric right now. I don't know.
So, do you think the capital is it opening up, or is it are they cautious, or what's happening right now? What are the VC thinking about today?
I think everybody is cautious, and there are certainly a few brave souls who are saying, it's always an opportunity. Whenever there's a challenge, there's an opportunity, right? And so definitely companies are having a harder time closing funding rounds. I think you're seeing the AI part of the community just taking all of the oxygen out of all of the other sectors, it seems. I mean, we're seeing, it's not like the funding is disappearing, but so much attention is focused on the AI side that, life science, material science, some of the other sectors are not getting as much attention as they used to. And so it'll be interesting to see, sort of how this cycle evolves in terms of funding and sector, and sort of the allocation across sectors.
So how does it compare to last year? If you look at last year and this year, and if you're an AI company last year, an AI company this year? Is it easier to raise money this year, or how is it? I mean,
Well,
what's the
if you're
sentiment?
an AI company, I'd say it is, I think it is harder this year. Um, last year, at least we were, I don't know, there was some optimism
Mhm.
that that the world would go on. Um, I do think what we're getting is, we had sort of this post COVID with the interest rate increases and all of those issues. We had a chilling effect on the venture community, right? And so you saw the LPs backing away somewhat, and LPs were telling the GPs, um, just slow down. You don't have to deploy as fast as you've been deploying. Let's be, a little bit more frugal in terms of the way we're managing our portfolio companies. So that was definitely a tilt. But the markets seemed healthy enough that we thought maybe the IPO markets would indeed open up, and there were some glimmerings of hope, and a few public offerings. But I think now, with the markets getting whacked, and a lot of anxiety around which way the market's going to go, it feels like, boy, I mean, everybody that was hoping to go public in the near future is probably sitting back and saying we better wait for things to settle down. So I think on the public market side, there's just substantially more pessimism, and then that trickles down, to the institutional investors, the LPs, which trickles down to the VCs, and then ultimately, of course, it's the entrepreneurs who feel the brunt of it. But there's still plenty of appetite for sort of getting into this next generation of AI technology. So there's enough dry powder out there. For the funding to continue, pretty much indefinitely. But it does seem to be on a somewhat more cautious basis.
So today we were going to talk about, how AI is shaping the future of work. And that brings up a point. You can feel the changes out in the valley,
Yeah.
that people are concerned about AI taking their jobs. But, are we really facing an evolution of jobs, or is it really a complete revolution?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great debate, and I really want to hear your point of view on it, because I think you're sort of more fervent in your embrace on the dramatic impact of AI than maybe I am. I do see AI has now become table stakes in all application development, and so it's getting cooked into pretty much everything, and a sort of a different way and a different sort of level of intensity than just a few years ago. It was a few years ago, everything had to be smart, right? So we had smart cities and smart buildings and smart factories and smart transportation, and we had everything was going to be autonomous, and autonomous vehicles and autonomous planes and autonomous submarines and whatever, right? So that was all AI, right? But with this sort of LLM/generative AI transformation, it restructures the sort of entire infrastructure of AI. So now, what does that mean in terms of the future of work? It makes AI much easier to use, right? So all of these agentic AI applications now, you don't need necessarily a data scientist, right? And you don't need an algorithm coder type expertise. And so all of a sudden, it can be applied everywhere. Now the question is, it goes back to all of the advanced technology questions, right? as as PCs came along, as the internet came along, as all these different technologies, as mobile came along, it actually did displace lots and lots and lots of jobs, right?
Yeah, I mean, and at the beginning, it's kind of like back at the beginning of the 20th century, people said, "Oh, we're never going to get rid of horses."
For example, okay,
Hello.
right, but again, so it's an interesting question how to think through how is the workforce going to shift. So again, we've seen it before. There's a claim that, oh, this time it's different because the technology is much smarter, and in the olden days, technology displaced unskilled labor. And then it displaced some of manual labor. Well, not really. And then it displaced sort of low education office jobs. And then, but now it's going to displace the Ivy Leaguers. Oh my God. Now we have to panic, right? I don't know. I mean, I think there's still plenty of intellectual work that needs to be done outside of what the AI is going to do. For again, the other analogy that occurs to me, when accounting software dramatically changed accounting, it did not mean there were fewer accountants, right? I mean,
Yeah, no, they just work differently.
They had to work differently, and they had more work to do. And so there is an argument that AI is going to create more work than it displaces. It's going to uncover opportunities that need to be pursued that would not necessarily have been uncovered as easily and would not have been pursued. And so, so you're going to see a shift in kind of where people spend their time and how people spend their time. But overall, I think you can certainly make the case that AI is going to create more work than it, eliminates. And so I don't know. I mean, again, you tell me, Gary. I know you have a point of view that I don't know if you're part of the crowd that says, thanks to AI, we're going to see the first one employee unicorn. I mean, and I don't discount that might be possible, but that's not going to be the core of the workforce. So where are you on this whole question?
Well, so from my perspective, the AI is really driving a fundamental change and shift in how we work,
Okay.
right? And it's rather than simply an incremental change, it's a really it's part evolutionary change and it's part revolutionary change.
Okay.
If we look at people that harness these capabilities, they're going to give you superpowers to do things. You're going to be able to do marketing and sales and have information, and data at your fingertips to not only, number one, help you make a decision, but actually make that decision for you. Not only understand how to code, you don't have to be a coder. You can use some of these tools to do things by just describing what you want to do. These kind of tools that are out there, the people that harness them are going to have superpowers, and you're going to, in my definition, you're going to have the super workers, right? People that go to the top of the companies who understand how to manage these tools to help them excel at their jobs, to be highly, highly efficient. And it's happening very quickly. You can see it now, right? You can see the spread of the 99% of the money and 1% of the population, but you're seeing those people that are 1% getting way wealthier than they ever have very, very quickly, right? It's changed. And so from my perspective, it's being able to adapt the technology on one side in our workplaces from an evolutionary standpoint, and then the other side, because of nature itself is changing, the nature of work itself is changing, it's really a revolution. We need to harness it. So all of the audience out there, if they haven't used ChatGPT or Grok, and yes, there are hallucinations that happen every once in a while, but you got to understand, we're going to have things like multi-agent large language models, multimodal large language models that can help us to be able to expand. I don't know about you, Bill, but one of the things that's really helped me in learning is now when I ask questions to the tools, before you just would think about that question for years, but now you can go out and get that question answered, and it changes the way that you learn. You learn in an entirely different way now because you have the answer to that question that you've pondered on for time.
Yeah.
And
No, it raises the question of, are you learning or are you becoming dependent? You're getting information. Are you thinking? I mean, I don't know. It's interesting.
well, here's this. I want to add to that point. Okay.
Yeah,
So I remember when
yeah,
I took math classes, algebra classes in
yeah,
high school,
right.
and my 17 math classes in college. And I remember one of the things that really helped me a lot is once I understood how to do it, I
Yeah,
could do all kinds of different problems and I could extend it. But once I understood the logic behind it, and from my
yeah,
perspective, it gives you some of that logic to understand, like the cancer vaccine for my dog, right? I didn't
okay,
know how to do that, but I
yeah,
understood that it could be done and there are ways to do it. Now I know where the resources are to get something like that built. And so, learning a language, a foreign language, a lot of mathematics and, algorithmic
yeah,
math, learning a foreign language. So having that in front of you where you understand the logic behind it,
yeah.
from my perspective, anyhow, just makes it easier. I'm not saying it solves the problem, but it's like having your grandmother that loves you and cares about you that can help you to be able to solve problems and understand, how many, you go out, people talk about, how many planets in the Milky Way galaxy, right?
Yeah.
They think about it their whole life. Well, you get on there with 6 billion Earth like planets in the Milky Way, estimated 2.7 trillion galaxies in the universe.
So
Hello.
do you think those numbers are right? And how does that help? How does that change the way you learn? And how does it help you? How does it
It,
help you think better?
it
Right?
makes you think differently.
Okay. So, I mean, I would argue that the reason the teacher told you have to show your work, right, is that the teacher wanted to know that you really understood how to solve the problem. It wasn't that you just, somehow got the answer by, cheating or borrowing or whatever. And so one could argue that,
You're going back to my algebra teacher, aren't you?
yeah, well, that, that AI could be making us dumber because it reduces the requirement that we think. I am really worried about whether or not AI is going to make it impossible for the next generation to know how to write a decent sentence in English or in any language for that matter, right? Because they're just going to run their thoughts through AI and have the AI spit out a perfectly grammatically correct, syntactically accurate sentence. But, if they
Well, but
need,
you forget there is something called vicarious learning.
yes, yeah,
Vicarious learning. And so, but seeing how it's done, so you understand the correct way to do it, it goes down through. It's like listening to music and understand how that music relates. It
yeah.
allows you to be able to make a piece yourself later. I mean, learning is
You
learning,
still,
right?
yeah, well, but again, back to show your work. I don't know. Does anybody ever parse sentences anymore? I don't know if in school teachers require students to parse a sentence. And so once you deconstruct a sentence, it's like deconstructing a math equation. It's like deconstructing, a car, right? I mean, if you can't take apart the car and put it back together, then you don't really understand how a car works. That's fine. We don't all need to understand how a car works. But the more and more and more we depend upon these other technologies to sort of bypass true learning, there is an interesting question in my mind. And I think we see it already today that the social media generation, the Gen Z gang, they are not learning how to write as much as they read. They read on social media. You can read whatever, Dostoevsky or F. Scott Fitzgerald or, whomever you want to read, and you can get a sense of the construction of language and narrative and story and, but until you are forced to take it apart, you don't really understand it, right? I mean, you get some understanding. So there, I think, is a negative associated with depending upon these agents for all of our thinking. Now, again, the hope is, my optimistic side, is that these agents will uncover things that will make you say, oh my God, yeah, we got to go chase that, or we got to go figure that out, or we can go do this, or we can, this enables us to exploit that. So that's the hope, that it will create this sort of imagination. It'll stimulate imagination. It'll stimulate motivation and enthusiasm to get things done, right? That you couldn't imagine getting done before. And then arguably, you can make the case, sort of contrary to the point you were just making, that agentic AI can democratize performance. So again, because these tools are now so widely available, everybody has access to it, presumably.
That's a good point. Democratization of opportunity. I agree with you. For the people that use them.
Yeah.
I agree. But here's the other thing.
Yes.
When we grew up,
yeah.
Remember you had these in first and second grade, C-spot run.
Okay.
I mean, think about it. Like the amount of data that you have in front of you every day, we never had that as kids. They're bombarded with information, and it's very complex. It's through some point, and even as a first grader, they're bombarded with iPads and information off that. They've got the Groks and Perplexities. They've got these tools out there. They're exposed to so much stimulation. I don't know if we have time to go down and deconstruct the sentence anymore. Because if it's like going out and winning a race. If you sit down there and, you start your car and you're revving it and the other person's at the finish line, well, what happens? So we've got to look at it. The amount of data we talked about, there's 175 zettabytes of data on the planet today.
Yeah.
That would be 124 times if you took DVDs or CDs and stacked them one on top of another, go back and forth between the Earth and the Moon today. And it's grown about 70%. So we're inundated. Poor, these kids. It would be interesting to go and see if they still say run, spot, run.
So okay. So I think we're a long way away from replicating the human brain. And if you think about it, now you say, yes, all of this data that now is available to the sort of current generation, it depends on how you measure data. So, when we were kids running around the neighborhood, there was an amazing amount of data that we had, access to, right? I mean, it was different kinds of data, more data about sort of the physical world than the sort of textual world or whatever you want to call it. But at this point, right, the human brain has an unbelievable ability to process massive amounts of data and then to learn from it. And so you think about how much cheaper it is I can't remember if you have kids or not. Do you have?
Yes, 2 kids.
Right. Yeah, okay. So it is so much cheaper it was so much cheaper for us to train our kids to be really good at all sorts of intellectual and physical skills. I mean, it costs, I don't know, tens of thousands of dollars maybe, right? For, to teach our kids an amazing set of skills. And they're spending billions and billions of dollars to try to teach computers, something close to, what it took tens of thousands of dollars to teach our kids. And our kids were way, way, way better at riding bikes than a computer is today, right? I mean, and try to get a computer to skateboard. Huh? Can you get a computer to skateboard? Maybe, I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe now, yes. I mean,
or get a computer to play roller hockey. I mean,
Mhm.
again, it was amazing how cheap it was to train our kids to execute on all these skills, right? And so,
I mean, it was easy to train them, but they weren't exposed to language like they are now. Think about it. As soon as
well,
even with my kids,
yeah,
my daughter's 28, and to go down through and to be able to use these tools, even computers, when she was a kid, to learn and use it. I remember buying the programs, and she would go in there, and my son, and
yeah,
play and learn. But imagine, their language capabilities, because they were listening all the time, were different than when I was a kid. We
well,
had less data coming at us than we do today. And the other thing is, here's the thing, it's really interesting about it. And then we could go back to some of our other parts in the future work. But
yeah,
we, as a kid, we talked about the Sahara Desert. But now if you want to look at the Sahara, you can go on YouTube, or you can go in some of these virtual experiences, put on your goggles, and you can actually go down through and feel like what it's like to be there in
well,
that environment, and you never have to go there. And it just, when you see a rhinoceros up close compared to was it 35 millimeter or whatever, we had these projectors in our classroom, and it was,
the Viewmaster.
yeah, you remember the Viewmaster thing? Stupid, you know what I mean? You buy those circle things and look at it, but now the world becomes three-dimensional and real, and you
Yeah.
can learn and you can feel like you're in that experience. And I think that, so going back to work, imagine all these tools and the kind of skills and competency you get to come into a job when you have these tools in front of you to help you. You can hyper personalize, so you can be educated, you can be trained exactly the way that it's best for you, whether it's auditory or visual.
Yeah.
Are you the right person for that job? How do we make you better? Right?
So certainly the potential for these new tools and technologies to make us superhuman is there. And what I hope is the case is that it's rather than increasing the concentration of wealth and power, it can actually diffuse it more broadly. So that was one of the brilliant aspects of the internet and the digital cell phones, was it did diffuse the sort of potential for economic benefits around the world. And so you had, farmers in India that, could buy and sell fertilizer and crops and data, et cetera, who couldn't before. So it's, there was an interesting diffusion of power and success that happened with some of these tools in the past. We'll see how that happens. We'll see how that happens with AI. I certainly hope that is true. But the flip side of it, the dark side, the evil side, is the degree to which, smart is enabling these tools to sucker us in to pathways that are distracting rather than constructive. And that's the whole anxiety around, Gen Z having been warped by social media. Now, I'm forgive me, Gen Zers out there. I don't mean to suggest that you're warped, but I do think there's some.
What's your email address?
No, I mean, it's obviously it's clearly a concern that in terms of all the data that people are being exposed to, I mean, me every day, in all of the different channels that come at me now, and people who wind up getting sort of sucked into the social media, where you're seeing things that are funny or cute or whatever, but and that's okay. Entertainment is fine, and you can learn from entertainment at some level, but are you actually developing your critical thinking skills when you are surfing social media. You're probably developing some thinking skills, but so that's the, that's sort of the negative aspect of all of this data that is coming at us, because this data is, all of these influencers who are creating these fun, cute, interesting, crazy video clips that are, wildly entertaining.
Yeah, well, that's, I was watching the Basset Hound with a hat on last night.
Okay. All right.
Simple pleasures, right?
So thanks to your stem cell treatment, you're now a Gen Zer. Is that what I'm saying?
That's a number. That'll be my fourth one. I have my third one in September. It'll be my fourth one in next March.
Okay.
Listen, the one thing I wanted to go back to a point because it's really important.
Yes.
So you're right in terms of democratizing the opportunity, but the people that adapt to these technologies the fastest are going to have a competitive advantage because they've harnessed the power of the tools. So that advantage, and the companies that harness them maybe have a 2 to 3 year advantage over other people, staying ahead of the curve. What do you think about that? I mean, I agree that it's going to be democratized. It'll happen in a short period of time. But the other thing is to use the tools now and start playing with them and get used to them to help make you better today.
Well, you can make the argument that only a few years ago, when AI was hard, right? When AI was hard, the people who knew how to do AI got, extraordinary salaries, right? And there was a relatively narrow group of people who were paid extraordinary amounts because AI was seen to be an important potential competitive advantage or tool for creating a competitive advantage. As the tools have broadened, I think those spikes have flattened. So it would be interesting to see what's going on out there. But if you look at the software engineers out there, 10 times, if not 100 times as many software engineers are using AI tools now as compared to 5 years ago, right? Because now they're more accessible to, sort of reasonably well-trained software engineers.
Great.
And so I think the spike in, the elite AI technologists is flattening.
Well, elite AI technologists that are building the tools, but the business folks that use the tools, I don't think we're there yet. They're not using them to the full advantage.
I don't know. I mean, so it depends on what business you're looking at and how and if they can use it. But, I was talking to a software engineer at a global brand name unicorn, company. So, a few years ago, it was a startup, but now it's a really big global brand name. Software engineers' comment was, oh yeah, we all use Cursor, right? And so, throughout the company, they're all using Cursor. It's like, whatever, if you were in a bank and you didn't know how to use Excel, right? Right. So today, if you're doing anything related to software, you're using these tools. So, because they become so prevalent and so, easy to use, a la, Excel. You can argue whether or not Excel was easy to learn. I don't know. But it was, you learned it, whatever. It became, just like a pencil and whatever. So they are diffusing, I think, at an incredibly rapid rate. Obviously, anybody and everybody can use ChatGPT and, Grok and whatever. I mean, so all those tools are open and available. And so now your point is, are you motivated enough to learn how to use them well, and get full advantage out of them? I think you personally are at one extreme end of that spectrum, right? You're using it very intensively to actually do sort of commercially valuable things. So I think most people are using it, as a substitute for Google for search, right?
No, I agree. I agree. And they're not harnessing the power.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just like StreamYard we're on right now. I remember when
Yeah.
StreamYard just came out and we picked it up and I started using StreamYard. People said, "Oh, why would you use StreamYard?" It's because it's a powerful AI driven tool. And now look at it. You can broadcast everywhere, from one place to thousands and thousands of tens of thousands of people at one time. It's amazing.
Right.
And so, from marketing, from sales and business development, being able, I remember the old days when, I mean, I remember Hoovers, when you used to use Hoovers to get business information. Now you get as fingertips, you can use LinkedIn Navigator and directly target those folks and get to them. Before it was tough. It's a whole different environment. So, I guess it's back to the point is, use the tools wisely to be able to help you, and if you look at, how do you think, going back to our point, how do you think AI is going to be integrated into daily work routines? Streamlining administrative opportunities, right? We do now scheduling, email filtering. That's another issue, right? The email inundated. People using WhatsApp to filter email because you have so many, you can't even get them anymore. You can't look at them. It's nuts.
Right. No, but to your point, right? I mean, again, in the old days, you had to have a lot of money and resource to get some of this information or to do some of these things like broadcast video, right? Now these tools have made it available to everyone. And while some people will be faster to adopt than others, the moat is empty, right? There is no moat anymore, right?
Right.
So in the olden days, it was a big moat if you wanted to broadcast video.
Oh, for a big note, you had to get a studio. You had to go into the studio, do your broadcast. It costs you thousands of dollars to do it. Now we can set it up in 2 minutes.
Right. But then, and so the people that are motivated, that jump on it and use it and grab it, they get a lead. They get a bit of a lead, but, you've got a thundering herd, behind you of people who can jump on it, tomorrow.
Right.
So that's the presumed democratization of access to superhuman power that, these tools enable. Now, but again, to your point about email, I think it's what all this is going to do is mean we have to run twice as fast to stay in the same place. Right?
I mean, it's happening now, right? It's not like, remember back in the early 90s when you had, you just started with cell phones and they were in your car and you had the car and, the cell phone in your car and you couldn't get out. You'd be sitting in your car with a 3-rod transmitter receiver, you're probably getting fried like a microwave. And you're doing this stuff, and we were thinking about, oh, this is so advanced. This is great. We're spending $1,000 a month for a bill sometimes. Yeah. And now look at it. Now everybody's got a phone and it's just normal.
Well, now nobody answers their phone, right? I mean,
they don't answer the phone. Yeah, that's true. They don't answer the phone because you know why? You get so many people using technology that are trying to scam you. They see your 415 or 650 area code or 408, and all of a sudden you're getting stuff from Pescadero and Half Moon Bay because they're smart. They're trying to catch you to open up so they can see if it's real or not.
Right. So, but I did this sort of thought experiment with a group of guys, in around the year 2000, where again, I'm old enough to remember the pre-internet universe. I know.
Me too.
But, and what we were realizing is that all these tools were just accelerating the number of transactions that we had to execute every day. So it used to be that, I mean, in the old world, you would have a couple of meetings and you would write a few memos every day, right?
Right. On a good day.
Well, yeah, okay.
And you wouldn't have people bugging you because before that you had beepers and the beeper would go off and you would have to get to a payphone. I don't know if you remember that, but you'd had to go to a payphone to make a phone call.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a different world, right? You weren't inundated like you are today. And it's
Right.
funny because you did a lot of business, but you weren't inundated like you are today.
Well, that's an interesting, I mean, again, so I was trying to think of it in terms of transactions, right? In terms
Mhm.
of a ping and a reping and a sort of IP sense, right? Internet protocol sense. So in terms of the number of pings and repings or whatever that you had, over time, now, I mean, we're all getting pinged at a pace through so many different channels that now it's simply overwhelming, right? It's,
So in psychology, they call it learned helplessness, Bill. When you
that,
get so much stimulation that you freeze.
right, right. No, and that's what my wife calls it as well.
Well,
So,
there you go. It's and and that's a challenge, right? Because I think you're
right,
right. It's just like on the email, the data part, I can't anymore I don't have time to look at all the email again.
yeah,
And I'm missing stuff. I know there's things in there that I'm
yeah,
missing that I don't have the time because I'm getting hundreds and hundreds of emails
yeah,
every day. And then it's not just the email, it's linked in with the 20,000 or so connections writing you things. I don't have time to respond to them all.
right,
And
right.
when,
No,
using these tools to be able to help us filter through all this all this noise so that we can make better decisions
right.
because we got to somehow use them to filter it down so we can one is help us
Yeah,
make a better decision and the other thing is clone us to be able to make the decisions for us, right?
right.
Ones that are low priority, let's make those let's other tools help us make those decisions.
Yeah. No, I mean, absolutely. Well, so sort of a somewhat amazing story. So Pegasus back in 2016, Pegasus invested in a company called X.AI. Believe it or not, there was a company called X.AI that
Mhm.
was sort of a precursor to Superhuman. And the big idea was X.AI would help you filter and prioritize your mail and would help you create templates of rapid responses, right? So that was this company called X.AI that we invested in. That it was just we weren't, it wasn't quite smart enough yet, and people weren't quite overwhelmed enough yet. So X.AI failed. Now, what we should have done is just kept the URL.
There you go.
I mean, and what we couldn't foresee, is that the business, didn't work out, but the URL was worth a fortune. So unfortunately, we didn't keep the URL, and I don't actually know what happened in terms of who sold it for what when before Elon came along and bought it. But but now I think the sort of current generation of AI should be smarter at accessing, at plugging into all of our channels. We've got, Messenger and Message, and we've got WhatsApp, and, we may have WeChat or not, I don't know, but Telegram and Discord and all these different sort of text channels and social media channels. And then we got our Slack channels and all our different email addresses, right? So, I think I have 12 channels, basically that people can use to get to me. That's insane, right? Why?
Well, the thing is, it's you remember when we did Findo back in 2016?
Bingo.
At a
Right.
Google like search for the personal cloud, we did it, but people didn't remember their passwords.
Yeah.
And then when we had unstructured data in there, the
Right.
pictures that they had, sometimes they didn't want people to see these pictures. It could be
No.
an old girlfriend or something, that
Right.
was 10 years old from AOL.
Right.
And, so we did some of those, but people at the time didn't understand the infobesity. But now those tools are critically important for us. And we've
But
got to have,
why hasn't somebody solved this yet?
well, I mean, it was solved back then, but people didn't remember their passwords. They didn't want to go back through. They were so busy, they didn't want to
Yeah,
tie in all their different accounts.
yeah,
And then they
yeah,
were afraid that having somebody else have
yeah,
access to their accounts, that they were
yeah,
afraid of security. And I
yeah,
can understand it. So
yeah,
it just didn't work.
yeah. No. So, well, we'll see. I mean, there was, again, we've heard two pitches now of agentic AI email inboxes that will suck in your email, and then will provide it. It sounds basically like a 2025 version of X.AI, but it'll filter it. It'll provide you with sort of authentic responses as opposed to out of office kind of responses. So it should be better, but our brains, you still need to provide some degree of attention, I think, to some number of these transactions, in order to, ensure that, you are doing the right follow-up.
Yeah, but
And
now we can you look at how much follow up? Do you know what you're missing today?
I,
That's the
yeah,
problem. The
no,
problem is we don't even know what we have. I
right.
had something just came in from Delaware, right?
Yeah.
So I had to do this corporate filing, and I
Uh-oh.
had so many emails that I didn't
Right.
remember. I
Yeah.
didn't even see it. I had
Yeah.
so many of them, and then if it goes to junk for whatever
Yeah.
reason, you got a problem because I don't check my junk all the time.
Right.
So having those tools. So in terms of your point, you have to pay attention to them. But right now, what are you doing? I
Well,
don't know.
right. No, and again, it's the fault of AI. It is the fault of AI that is enabling all of these different actors out there to be more efficient at sending me stuff. And it's not all crap. I mean, there's a lot of crap, but it's not all crap, right? And so it's the tools are, back to we have to run twice as hard just to stay in the same place. Except I think we have to run 10 times as fast just to stay in the same place compared to only a few years ago. I mean, and so now, okay, so what does that mean for the future of work? I don't know if there's going to be a rebellion in terms of what you call infobesity. I don't know if corporations are going to filter sort of, more aggressively filter your email inboxes. That would be a solution of some sort to create white lists and blacklists, and within the corporations, filter inbound emails to make sure that the people inside are not overwhelmed by lower priority messages that marketeers and all of that get through the email filters. But that's going to be a variation on, remember when like Facebook would change its algorithm or Google would change its algorithm, all the marketing algorithms are going to explode when messaging gets blocked.
Mhm.
And then you're going to have this arms war, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
you
And
know,
I mean, the problem is if they block it out, there still could be things that you really need to have. Maybe your
yeah,
grandmother or somebody else will send you a message and you get upset because you didn't get it because they valued it as a low value to the company,
yeah,
but you personally valued it as very high value because it could be something critically important for you.
yeah, right,
So
right,
it's who makes the determination. It's fascinating how this has gone.
yeah,
When you look at we're coming up to the top of the hour on this
oh,
thing, Bill.
yeah,
So if we look at it, if we treat AI as really a partner, a strategic partner, not just a buzzword, and
yeah,
really identify where these pain points are as
mhm,
a worker, as a company, so solutions can be offered. I mean, companies need to train their employees, right? Or we need to train ourselves to understand how to use these tools better because and use AI to help you learn how to
yeah,
use the tools. I mean,
yeah,
that's the other thing. And, on the other side of it is, we're going to have ethical issues that are going to keep popping up about because of these AI tools with things like bias, we got to figure out how to address those to make sure everything's fair as possible.
Right. Right. No, I mean, and that's, again, I don't have a lot of hope for, I mean, so, ensuring fairness sounds like government intervention. I, you know, I
Yes.
mean, I don't know how that's going to work, right? I mean, that, boy, I tell you, GDPR has been such a wild success in Europe. It really has helped that continent, hasn't it? I mean,
No,
Jesus.
I mean, that's another issue. You don't want to hold down innovation because you're trying to set up these rules and, put your country back in the Stone Ages compared to everybody else. It's a big problem.
Yeah. No, so we didn't even touch on the whole regulatory issue, which is another big issue. But I guess that means we'll have to have another conversation at some point in the future.
Yeah, we got to do it. We'll set it up in another 2 weeks. Bill, what are your closing thoughts for everybody out there, and how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah. So again, my hope is that, and I believe that you can make the case that this will be true, that AI will cause some shifts in labor force and will cause some, disruptions in some areas of work, but ultimately AI is going to create more work than it will eliminate. And so we're not going to see sort of the mass depopulation of business, where humans are shunted aside and replaced with AI. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I also think that there's a lot of reason to be optimistic that AI is going to democratize access to knowledge and skill rather than concentrate it further. And that will diffuse around the world, and that could be a very, very good thing for humanity. So there are certainly these problem areas of AI in terms of the evil use and the regulatory questions, but I choose to be optimistic that the net effect is going to be an overall improvement in the human condition.
Oh, that's perfect. That's a great way to end this. I agree. How do people get a hold of you, Bill?
So I'm a partner here at Pegasus Tech Ventures. My email is bill@pegasusventures.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn as Bill Reichert. So that's probably the easiest way. But Gary, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this. I appreciate it and look forward to our continuing conversations.
Yeah, no, I do too. And it's great co-hosting this with you. And to all the audience out there, stay happy, stay safe, and stay healthy. And Bill and I will be back in another 2 weeks with another exciting edition. You can reach me at Gary@GSDVS.com. Great to see you, and have a nice rest of the day, everybody.